And thank you everyone for joining us today. Last week we shared that although we're a little more than a year out from the original Stay Home, Save Lives order, our workload at the Employment Department has not diminished. With so many new programs to learn, build, and administer, and processes and rules to update based on new federal guidance, and now that many people are reaching the 1-year mark on their claims, we're seeing an added bump in new claims and new questions. Before I share more about what that means for our current workload, I do have a brief update on the current state of Oregon's workforce. For the past 3 months, Oregon's unemployment rate has ticked down by 0.1% each month to 6.0% in March. For the past 11 months, the pace of recovery in Oregon has largely mirrored the national recovery as well. Over the past year, employment fluctuations in the leisure and hospitality industry, which includes restaurants, bars, coffee shops, hotels, golf courses, and fitness centers, have accounted for a large share of the swings in Oregon's total unemployment. The industry had peak employment in February 2020 before the pandemic's impact was being felt, with 216,300 jobs. Within just 2 months, half of those jobs have been cut. The industry is close to its more recent high point of last November of 165,200 jobs, but that is still clearly far below its February 2020 peak. The monthly unemployment report shows that a year out from the pandemic, more and more people are working, but there are still a very large number of people who are not. Research from the Office of Economic Analysis shows that 1 out of every 6 Oregonians in the workforce has kids, works in an occupation that cannot be done remotely, and does not have another non-working adult present at home. Unemployed workers in this category face real barriers to returning to work, even if and when they are called back from work. This is one of the barriers also making it difficult for some businesses to hire workers. Getting people back to work is a critical element of getting Oregon's economy back on track as the pandemic subsides. Expanding our job seeker services and our employer services is a top priority for us. As for our other top priority of administering unemployment benefits, our employees' workload is still in overdrive and unfortunately will remain that way for quite a while. With many claims hitting the 1-year mark, we're receiving and answering more calls now than at almost any time since the pandemic hit our economy last March. And the number of inquiries through the Contact Us form also is very high. We're committed to processing these new claims as quickly as we can and to providing great customer service to Oregonians who we know are relying on us. We continue to hire and train employees so we can move our more experienced employees to those duties that require more attention. This category of work includes manually processing claims. When people receiving regular unemployment or PEUC reach the 1-year mark on their claim, they must file a new claim. We have to review both the old and the new claim to determine which program to pay the person on to avoid a decrease in their weekly benefit amount or other potential problems with them getting their benefits. This process takes time and much of it cannot be automated in our systems. Some people may have to wait up to 6 weeks before they receive their benefits. We know this is a real hardship and we are doing everything that we can to make this transition go as smoothly and as quickly as possible. In past media briefings, we've talked about overpayments, situations where somebody received benefits they were ultimately not eligible for. Overpayments can be caused by many things, including people giving us inaccurate or partial information, or by agency error. Other overpayments are caused by retroactive changes to the benefit programs, or by a decision that we made being changed on appeal after the administrative law judge receives different information than we had when we made our initial decision. This is unfortunately a reality of rapidly implementing several new and changing programs while waiting for clarification from the Department of Labor over the past year. We continue to send decision letters to people who have an overpayment, and these decisions may look like billing statements. They do all include instructions for what the person should do. We understand that some people may not be able to pay us back immediately, and we certainly know that many Oregonians are in a very difficult situation. The last thing that we want to do is to ask people to repay the benefits they believe they were eligible for. People can request a waiver and possibly avoid having to pay back the debt by submitting the waiver form. We continue to waive recovery of overpayments where we have the authority to do so. And there is good news that federal changes have given us more leeway when it comes to waiving some overpayments. If the person did not cause the overpayment, they can request a waiver and possibly avoid having to pay back the debt. If the overpayment is the result of an honest mistake by the claimant, they can either pay the debt in full or they can contact us to set up a repayment plan. And we encourage people to very carefully review our decisions about their eligibility for benefits and about potential overpayments, and to follow the instructions with those decisions, including how to appeal them if they think that the decision is wrong. We want people who are eligible for benefits to get them, so we want to know if people think a mistake was made. People who intentionally provided misleading information to get benefits cannot get a waiver and may also face other financial penalties added on to repaying their overpayment. To request a waiver for an overpayment, people should go to our website, unemployment.oregon.gov, and the quick links section. There's an overpayment waiver link that can be found in the after applying section. We're glad that the federal government has recognized the impact of the pandemic and is giving us more flexibility when it comes to handling some overpayments. And the Oregon legislature is also considering a bill, Senate Bill 172, which would give us more flexibility to ease the impact of recovering overpayments. We know that the unemployment process can be confusing. Many new programs have been created and extended and changed. New federal rules have required some people to provide proof of employment, and the 1-year mark in a claim is causing confusion for some. There are some resources we want to make sure people are aware of. One of those has to do with pandemic unemployment assistance and the proof of employment or self-employment. Federal rules require that people receiving PUA submit proof of employment or self-employment, and we've begun sending letters to some people receiving PUA because they either haven't sent us their proof or because the information they sent us was not sufficient. It's important for people to respond to these letters. If we don't receive acceptable proof of employment or self-employment by the deadline on the letter, federal rules require that we stop paying benefits. Our interactive multilingual tool at unemployment.oregon.gov helps people figure out what type of information they need to provide. And staying on top of fraud attempts continues to be a major priority. We keep updating our ID theft and fraud webpage with new information. If you receive mail about an unemployment claim or payments and you did not apply for benefits, please return the mail to the employment department right away. Where to return the letters and payments and more fraud-related information can be found at unemployment.oregon.gov. In the quick links section, click on either ID theft or UI fraud. And if you're an employer who is concerned about people turning down offers of work without good cause, let us know by clicking on the link that says report employees not returning to work in the quick links section. With other state legislative action, we're very pleased that legislators are working on a $2.4 billion tax relief bill that reduces the unemployment insurance tax impact on businesses most impacted by the pandemic, while still ensuring that Oregon's UI trust fund remains solvent in the long term. These changes take advantage of Oregon's solvent UI trust fund and use some of the existing reserves to provide short and long-term relief to Oregon businesses, while protecting them against long-term risks of the trust fund becoming insolvent to the extent that we can predict way into the future. Businesses that are most impacted by the pandemic, like restaurants, barbershops, and others that saw big increases in their experience ratings, will see the most relief under this bill. We continue to offer webinars to the public. We have one on overpayments that was rescheduled to Thursday, April 22nd. And the following Thursday, April 29th, we'll be holding another webinar focusing on issues related to school workers. Both of these webinars will offer simultaneous interpretation in Spanish, Vietnamese, Russian, and Cantonese. And people can register for these webinars and to view all of the past ones at unemployment.oregon.gov/webinars. Sharing some of the numbers regarding the benefit programs, between March 15th of 2020 and April 13th of 2021, the Oregon Employment Department has paid $8.6 billion to more than 579,000 people. That's more than 12.7 million weeks of benefits. Last week alone, we paid about $144 million to 119,000 people. Our employees have spent the past year working incredibly hard to get people benefits so they can put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads. We know that people are counting on us every day, and every day I'm thankful to our employees who have worked nonstop to help people. I so value their commitment and dedication to helping their neighbors, families, friends, and fellow Oregonians. As we continue to pay benefits, I'm also looking forward to sharing more information about the work we're doing to help people get back to work. As you've helped us in the past by sharing critical resources and information for those that are trying to access unemployment benefits, we also hope that you'll be sharing information for those who are seeking work so we can provide more help to Oregonians through our WorkSource Oregon division. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Now we are opening the lines to members of the media to ask questions. We will call on you in the order you RSVP'd. Remember, if you are joining us by phone, be sure to hit *6 to unmute yourself. If you don't get your question answered, please email oed_communications@oregon.gov. So first is Peter Wong with Pamplin Media.
Good afternoon. I think you answered a couple of my questions on pending legislation, but I just wanted to ask on, I believe it's Senate Bill 3389, the tax bill. I understand it was not amended from the version that was presented to committee, and you took part of that committee session, as I recall, a few weeks ago. I don't have the date in front of me, but I did write about it. So my understanding, it was not amended from the form that was presented to the committee.
That's my understanding as well, is that it passed out of the committee without being amended.
Okay. My other question had to do with Senator Wyden's rollout of a framework for, he has talked, I'm sure you're aware of it. He's talked about overhauling the entire system, and he came out with that today. And I don't know if you've had a chance to, obviously he has to fill in some details, but I don't know if you had a chance to review any of them as to whether they might pose obstacles. One of them, I think, he proposes that the benefits be tied to 75% of wages. I presume that would take some more calculation than is possible under some of the current systems in operation among the states. But there are other provisions that would make permanent, like the self-employment and gig workers would get benefits. I believe Oregon already meets a 26-week minimum for benefits. And I think Wyden also ties, if there's another, God forbid, another pandemic or other economic event of that magnitude, that there would be automatic triggers for benefits in the system. I guess the question is, have you had a chance to review any of the elements or hear about any of the elements, and whether any of them would pose any problems for state administration of benefits?
Sure. So haven't had a chance to read through the full text of all of the provisions yet. We're certainly looking at that. The bill does have an implementation timeline that is out significantly farther than we've seen with the more emergency programs during the pandemic. Some of the provisions would require quite a bit of extensive work with the technology system. Some of them, the timing might work out for us to be able to just build into the modernized system that we're building. Certainly looking at a lot of the policies there, what has struck me so far is that there are some things that are sorely needed, we think. Some of the reform, you mentioned the triggers for benefit extensions. That's something that through most recessions, we end up with some ad hoc new benefit programs or benefit extensions. And that causes some of the challenges that we've seen during this pandemic, where all states are left having to build whatever the new extension program is after it gets passed by Congress, rather than having something already designed, built, ready to roll out when the conditions require the additional benefits. So that's something that we certainly think is a good long-term fix. It also looks at providing adequate administrative funding to states to actually administer the program so that they are prepared to provide the levels of service that the public needs and deserves. And a lot of the provisions that are in there, Oregon actually is already doing quite well with meeting them. Some of the things would require changes like the minimum wage replacement rate, but the minimum duration of benefits and a lot of the other kind of adjustments to the floor, the minimum level of safety that the safety net provides, Oregon is either already there or quite close. So we'll continue to look at that and certainly look forward to working with Senator Wyden's office and with others to look for both the best policy and make sure that there's time for these longer term reforms to the program to be implemented well.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Next up is Lindsay Nadwich with COIN. Okay, so Lindsay said she might not be here. So Bill Poyler with Statesman Journal. Bill?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry. So David, and I've put in a request about this, but I'm curious, when the CARES Act came, did the state receive funding for like administration costs, like you were just mentioning about, did you receive funding for that kind of stuff through the CARES Act?
There was some administrative funding provided through the CARES Act in a couple of different ways, and I'm hesitating a little bit because there have been several different rounds of federal legislation. When the pandemic first hit, the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act had some administrative funds that was made available to states just up front, basically anticipating that states would have to quickly scale up, hire a lot of people. When the CARES Act was passed, I don't believe that piece of legislation had additional designated administrative funding. It did provide that the federal government would reimburse states for standing up the new programs. So for instance, the technology work needed to create the PUA program or to program in the PEUC extensions. In terms of the ongoing administration of those programs, although the federal law talks about states receiving full reimbursement for the cost of doing that, that has been interpreted to mean that states get reimbursed for those new federal programs the same way that we get reimbursed for the regular state unemployment insurance programs. And that funding is not full reimbursement. Over time, it's averaged about 70% in Oregon. So we are receiving additional funds, but not full reimbursement for the total cost of administering the programs.
So did that complicate things and make things take longer because you didn't get direct funds? Did that make things take longer to administrate the benefits that were provided to people under the CARES Act?
That didn't really impact things. A number of things in Oregon that we prepare for so that those won't be pain points. Certainly the trust fund was solvent enough to keep paying benefits before all of those reimbursements could start coming through. And on the administrative funds also, we didn't slow down our hiring or implementation work waiting for the federal funding to come through. We had enough kind of existing operating capital at that part of our budget cycle to continue to make the hiring and the other improvements we needed to without having to wait for the federal money to come through.
Okay, thanks, David.
Mm-hmm.
Up is Kate Davidson with OPB.
Hi, I wanted to ask an overpayment question.
I think you went back on mute, Kate.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
I can now, yes.
Okay, thank you so much. An overpayment question, and this is sort of about the third category where claimants are not at fault, for example, in agency error. I wanted to make sure I understood changes in law. Would that category include people being reclassified between PUA and UI overpayments that result from that?
It probably would. It can depend a little bit because, for instance, if somebody intentionally didn't give us accurate information because they thought they would get a higher amount of benefits under one program or the other, and then we find out and switch them over, that would be a situation where it was something that they caused intentionally. or they might have given us inaccurate information accidentally where it would be a claimant caused one. If it was a situation where the person gave us all the information we asked for and either we made an error or there were some of those retroactive program changes, which certainly happened as PUA was extended at different times. In those latter scenarios where it was a retroactive change or there was some kind of mistake originally, those would be non-claimant caused overpayments that would be in that third category that you were referring to.
And I know that the agency has said that waivers are available in this third category. And I just want to clarify whether it's your understanding that the agency is automatically granting waivers for overpayments in this third category, or if it's still on a case-by-case basis as people apply for waivers. Do people have to apply in the third category?
So we do want people to apply. And part of that is because we have some temporary provisions in place right now while the state of emergency continues to be in effect. During the state of emergency, we are, wherever we have the ability, we are waiving the recovery of those overpayments. So we're not waiting for people to submit those forms, but we do really want people to submit them because when the state of emergency ends, we'll be going back to more normal operations where it is something that people need to request because we don't know in typical times whether it would be a hardship for someone or not. And we need to get the information needed to know whether it would be creating a hardship for the person for us to recover the overpayment.
But you're saying that the department is automatically granting waivers in the third category?
Yes, I believe that we are, and I'll certainly follow up if I find out that that's not the case. There are some situations where an initial offset takes place before some of the manual intervention needed to stop the offsets happens. But when that has taken place, we are kind of undoing that offset. But our intent is to be waiving those wherever we can
Okay.
on the non-claimant fault overpayments.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just let me know if you hear something else when we hang up.
Okay.
Thanks.
Next up is Dick Hughes with the Hughesisms.
Thank you very much for doing these. I want to go back to something, David, that you said at the very beginning. And if I heard you correctly, the phone lines are as busy as they have been, and the contact us is also very busy. Do you have any idea how many contact us forms are being submitted on average by day or week or whatever? And are you planning to add any additional phone lines?
So in terms of the contact us, I don't have that data in front of me, and the current system that we're using doesn't give us as much data as we would like about kind of the pace of inquiries coming in. I believe I've mentioned in the past that we're working on some replacement infrastructure for that will allow us to both handle the inquiries more efficiently and get through them more quickly, and also give us hopefully better data for managing and reporting out on that. In terms of the phone lines, we have added a huge number of phone lines. The current kind of challenge isn't the infrastructure of the phone system itself, which has been bolstered early on in the pandemic. That was a challenge when we were getting, I think at 1 month, over 20 million incoming calls. The infrastructure has been bolstered to be able to handle that kind of volume. The challenge right now is having enough people with enough experience with all of these different programs to answer all of the calls quickly enough. And we are, as I mentioned, hiring more people and doing a lot more training. And importantly, a lot of what we're doing is proactive work. And this is some of what we learned during the focus adjudication and other efforts that we've done, is that if we can take the people who have that deeper experience, we know, for instance, that a lot of the people that filed new claims, we have to look at both of those claims. If they followed that flow chart on our website that says when to file a new claim or when to just keep filing the weekly certifications, we have that information and we have teams of people working through those claims as quickly as they can. And those people don't need to call us if there's been a 1 week pause. We're still working on their claims and we will get to it. So as those people are able to work through those issues more quickly, fewer people will need to contact us. But again, one of the core things is getting more people and getting more training to a lot of our employees. And that is an ongoing effort that we're working on constantly.
Thank you. And an unrelated follow-up question, following up on Peter Wong's question regarding Senator Wyden's proposed legislation. I understand you haven't had a chance to look at it in depth, and I looked at it and certainly don't understand a lot about it. But given what you know at this point, are there additional things that you would like to see included in such legislation? Additional things you would like Congress to do?
I really haven't had a chance to go through it fully enough to have an answer to that yet. We've looked at the high level talking points and think that some of the really big needed reforms that I mentioned, like the adequate administrative funding, the broadening of protections as a floor nationally, I think would be good and certainly would provide a more robust safety net. And having those permanent extension triggers and programs are key things. I just haven't had an opportunity to look through in enough detail to know if there are other things that aren't addressed in there yet.
Thank you. That's very understandable.
Next up is Keaton Thomas with KATU.
Good. Thanks for taking the time. Kind of following up to that same question, more specifically, but also just conceptually speaking, how do you, as the person who runs Oregon's employment department, feel about a permanent extension to offering benefits for self-employed workers? That was one of the things that Wyden has suggested in his package.
Sure. I think it's a really important policy thing to look at. I know there was a state bill that was introduced also. During the pandemic, we've seen that is one area where to different degrees in different states, that's kind of a gap in the safety net. And I've shared that in Oregon, actually, some of the gig economy that is not covered by regular unemployment insurance, that actually is covered by unemployment insurance in Oregon. So the gap is a little bit smaller in Oregon than in many other states, but there's still a lot of people that face the prospect of not having any support during a huge economic recession. So setting up some sort of permanent program like that, I think would be a way to make that safety net much stronger. Haven't had a chance to look through the details of the program. I think the PUA program has provided some absolutely essential support to people during an emergency, but we've also seen some of the challenges of trying to have a permanent program that's exactly like that. So I think having a little bit more time to think through all the implications, looking at how to determine benefit amounts, how the benefits are funded, and what those eligibility requirements would be, because it is a little bit different for somebody that's self-employed than for someone that has a more traditional employment relationship. But in terms of broad policy goals, I think it certainly is a good thing to be looking at to try to make that safety net stronger.
And then in a similar kind of follow-up, then I guess, what am I trying to ask you? I had it on the tip of my tongue. Over the course of the pandemic, I'm just hoping that you can give me some sort of context on Oregon's reliance on that PUA program. I know it was used quite a bit, but I'm not exactly sure if everyone was basically just like over the past 12 months, how important was that PUA program into getting benefits to people, and how many people used it, and would that be the same kind of going forward, or was it used in more specific or nuanced circumstances that may not carry forward past this pandemic?
In terms of how helpful it's been, it's helped a really large number of people. So we've paid out about $738 million in PUA benefits since the pandemic began to over 105,000 people. So that's a huge number of people who got that kind of support. And by definition, the people those 105,000 plus people would not have been able to receive any unemployment benefits. So it was a huge safety net for those people and has helped keep Oregon's economy overall going, because the money that's paid out in PUA or UI benefits tends to get respent in local economies and help stop kind of the downward economic spiral from getting even worse. in terms of how a program like that could be used in the future, I certainly hope that what we've seen during this pandemic is not something we see again. So I think it would be pretty unusual to see overnight such a huge demand for the program. I certainly think there would still be a lot of small businesses, business owners that would be using it. And I think it would continue to provide an important support. It really will also depend on how it's structured going forward and what those requirements are and how it's funded. But I think it, as I said, it's an important part of a safety net. Just haven't had time to look at, for instance, the permanent version proposed in Senator Wyden's legislation to see how that might be different from what the PUA program has been.
Thank you.
Next up is Laurel Noble with KOBI. Laurel Noble. Okay, we'll come back. Next is Mike Rogaway with the Oregon.
Hey, David. Could you walk me through mechanically what happens when people report fraud? What does the department do immediately with that information? And what can people expect to hear back from the department after they've made that report?
I'm going to be talking a little slowly because I'm not going to share things that kind of tip off what our fraud prevention measures are. And we get reports of fraud a number of different ways. So part of it depends on the type of information that we get and from who. So for instance, if it's someone reporting that they received checks made out to them or information about a claim purportedly made by them and that they had not filed for benefits, we do some work to make sure that the person that we're talking to is the real person, take appropriate action to stop any additional payments from going out, if any payments have gone out, and work with law enforcement as appropriate to pursue criminal prosecution and to look for any related schemes that may be going on. We get reports that sometimes are very clear cut. Some of the ones that I just mentioned, like someone saying, I'm David Gerstenfeld, I received something saying I filed a claim for benefits and I didn't. We have quite a bit of concrete information to act on. Other times we get some very vague reports that may say, I think John Doe is fraudulently claiming benefits. So we have to do some digging to identify who it's referring to, look at the claim for any indicators that it might be suspicious. And again, depending on the circumstances, we will sometimes reach out to the person that made the report. Sometimes we'll reach out to the person whose claim it was or to others that might have information about it. And then certainly working with our internal fraud investigators, work with law enforcement, with other agencies to move on all of those. We are somewhat limited in the types of information we can share back to people because there are strict confidentiality laws about claims for benefits. So there certainly are times when somebody might report suspected unemployment insurance fraud, and we can't really give much information back about whether that claim was actually filed, whether any benefits been paid out on it or not, or what the outcome might be because of those federal and state confidentiality laws. So I'm not sure if that gets at what you were asking, but it really does depend a fair amount on the type of fraud and the level of detailed information that we receive.
It does. It's helpful. What I want to be clear about is people who think they themselves were victims of identity theft and somebody's filing a claim in their name and they file a claim with you to say this isn't legitimate. To what kind of acknowledgement or follow-up can they expect from your department to know that that's being dealt with, people operating under their name?
I don't have a lot of details right in front of me. I know that we get a lot of reports through the Contact Us form, and they do get an acknowledgement that we received the report. Again, there are some limits on what we can report back. And we are sometimes also getting people who are making reports like that who are actually themselves trying to commit unemployment insurance fraud. So we're not sending a letter out to everyone necessarily saying we received a report on this date, here's the outcome of the situation. It does depend a little bit on what the situation is. We certainly are trying to give as much information and resources to people who are in that situation, because frankly, if their identity has been used to file a fraudulent unemployment insurance claim, it means that at some point in the past, somebody had access to their stolen identity and there may be other issues. So we want people to know how to contact law enforcement, the IRS, other resources to deal with the other potential issues they may be facing also.